Every year, more and more gardeners are planting vegetables in the landscape. And this year we've planned a garden full of very easy crops to grow for those new to vegetable gardening, or perhaps people wanting to introduce children to growing vegetables. And for our spring garden, primarily we're planting from seed. The one exception that we're going to work with today are onions. These are planted from sets, which are small plants. You can see they already have their roots developed and some shoots. And we'll plant these in the ground and they'll be quick to get started. You could find sets at garden centers or if you have a local agriculture store. But the remaining seeds, plants are grown from seed. And we're going to be putting our tallest plants in the middle of this bed. I'm placing 3 rows down the length of my bed with the tall plants in the middle. That'll be peas on one half of the garden and chard on the other. And interestingly, all but the chard is going to be spaced at 4 inches, so that's really easy to remember. So we're going to plant our peas at 4-inch intervals. And I have to pull off my glove here as best you can. These seeds are large, so they're pretty easy to work with. Now you'll notice that I have a trellis in place above my peas. And peas do need some support as they grow. You don't have to get fancy, just using any variety of materials, string and any scrap wood you might have to create a support. Now you can see I'm burying the seeds pretty deep, about 1 inch up to 1.5 inches below the soil. Peas are quick to germinate. You could give them a little boost by soaking the seeds before you plant to help them come up even faster. Now on either side of the peas, I'm going to be growing spinach and radish, and then also beets on the other end. All 3 of these crops are planted in a very similar manner, and they have very little seeds, as we can look here. So it's a little bit harder to distribute these. The radish aren't too small, but it can be hard. The smaller the seed you have, the smaller it is to get them evenly spaced. So don't worry too much if the spacing isn't perfect. You can always come back later and thin the crop to your desired spacing. The smaller the seeds are, the harder it is to get accurate spacing, but you can always come back later and thin the plants out to your desired spacing. Now these seeds, in general, the smaller the seed, also the shallower they're planted. In the case of radish, spinach, and beets, we want to cover with about 1/2 inch of soil. Okay, our chard is going to be a little bit different. It has wider spacing than the rest of these crops. We're going to space our chard at 6 inches. They get a little bit larger and just need some more room to grow. And these are going to be down at the other half of our garden. I have a really pretty colorful variety here. This is one of my favorite crops to grow because it's so bright and colorful in the garden. Also, you can grow it all season long. It's typically a cool season crop, but we can get away with leaving it in the garden over the summer to add some interest and color, and then come back and start harvesting again in the fall. Look at these seeds. They're kind of interestingly shaped. They're a bit bigger and easier to work with. And so for these, we want to go about 6-inch spacing, which I always think of as kind of the width of my hand. And these are going to be covered a little bit more, than our radish and spinach. We want to cover these seeds with about 1/2 inch of soil. And of course, after we get all these seeds in, you want to water everything in really well to get them started. Now, onions are planted a little bit differently. They still are spaced at 4-inch intervals. Now, if you want to harvest some of your onions as green onions, you can actually place them about 2 inches apart like this, and then come back in and you would pull every other onion to harvest in that green stage. But if you're going to grow your onions up without harvesting, go ahead and space them at that full 4 inches to give them plenty of room for the bulbs to develop. And you can see I dug a fairly deep trench here. I'm on the edge of a slope, so it might be a little deceiving how deep or shallow it is. But what our goal is to cover these onions with about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of soil. And primarily I'm pushing in from the outside of my trench to cover these up. So you should see the green stems coming up above the soil as they're set in place. That one didn't quite get deep enough. If you don't want to dig trenches, you can use like a small bulb planter to get your onions in place. Now once everything's planted, we want to water these in, but you do need to be careful when you're watering seeds in, especially the smaller the seed, because the soil will splash and it could make seeds go deeper into the soil or come up more shallowly. So using a gentle sprinkle from a watering can or even drip irrigation works wonderfully. Keep your seeds evenly moist to allow them to germinate, but avoid having them too wet, just as we would any other plant. Remember to come back and check on your vegetables in a couple of weeks to see if they need to be thinned out, and enjoy an easy crop and a great experience to share with family members.